to another video. Now I know that I do say quite a lot I'm not a watercolour artist, but the more I think about it, the more I realise that I do actually use watercolour quite a lot, especially in my sketchbooks. I use it to, do colour testing and composition testings and things. And so I thought it might be fun to sort of talk to you guys about my favourite watercolours, the colours that I've used the most this year. So I guess you could say my favourite watercolour list for the year. And give you some of the ideas on the colours that I've been using, and yeah, let you know what I like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my watercolour favourites for 2022 and let you know the colours that I've been using the most. I have been exploring watercolour a lot more this year than what I would normally be doing. And so I have got quite a collection of watercolours. This isn't even all of them, I have more, but these are the ones that I've chosen based on the ones that I find I've used the most. So you can see that, quite a lot of them have, had the life squeezed out of them. Some of the bigger tubes, these are actually the second versions of these. So I started with the smaller version and then I used it up, and so I got a bigger version. So I found that these are the ones that I do use the most. So when I say I'm not a watercolour artist, what I mean is that I don't really use watercolour as a medium in my final art pieces. I tend to be a lot more of a acrylic artist. So when I use watercolour, I'm really using it mostly in sketchbooks, and so I'm really not too concerned about light fastness or any of the technical aspects. I have noted down the pigment colours of all of these because I do know that a lot of people out there are interested in what pigments are actually in the watercolors, because some of them you can actually mix yourself. Like some of the pre-mixed colors usually contain a few different pigments that are available as tubes of paint on their own. So if you already have them, then you can mix those colors rather than buying the tube. So for that reason, I have included the pigment numbers of all these colors just in case you're interested, and I will also list them all down in the description. Now most of these are Daniel Smith. There are a few other brands, like I do have some Holbein, and I also have some of the Schminke Aquarelle colors, but the majority of them are Daniel Smith. I find that out of all of the watercolors that I've used in my life, and I have used a few, I've used Winsor & Newton, Schminke, Holbein, a couple of the cheaper versions as well, like the confection palettes. I can't remember the name of the brand, but I've used a lot of cheaper ones too, and I've found over the years that the Daniel Smith quality is, in my opinion, really, really fantastic, and almost, I wouldn't say superior, but definitely very, very high in quality. And so I found that I do prefer to use these. Except for a few outliers, I do tend to gravitate towards Daniel Smith. A lot of these colours I have in the tubes, and I also have in the solid pans. And a lot of these colours I have obviously squeezed into the solid pans, but I have bought some of them as the pans. So for example, the Cascade Green and the Phthalo Blue and a couple of the other neutrals, I have bought pans, but I do have tubes as well, a lot of them as well. So when the pan's empty, I just fill them back up again. So yeah, I'm just going to do like a quick little swatch of all of them and work my way through the rainbow of colours that I have here, and yeah, tell you a little bit about why I like that particular colour. So the first colour that I'm going to be talking about is actually not even a watercolour, it's actually a gouache. But I have been using this Naples Yellow Italian as a really nice neutral colour. It's kind of like, I would compare it to a raw, let me think, a raw sienna maybe that's, been mixed in with white. It is semi-transparent, so you can water it down to make it really, really transparent if you want to, but it does have white in it, so it does have a bit of opacity in it. So it really mixes nicely to make some really nice greens, oranges and yellows. The pigments are PY35 and PY42 and PY6. I'm not a pigment technical person, so don't ask me what they mean, but this is the one that I've been using. I have also used the Winsor & Newton watercolor version of the Naples Yellow, but I found that this one is a little bit more earthy. Like it's a bit more of a natural, almost neutral kind of color, and it's not too strong. So I find that this mixes really nicely. It works really nice for like beachscapes, for like the sand areas, because you can, you know, lighten it and darken it. It works, it's quite versatile in that way. And like I said, it does mix really nicely with some of the other pinks and things that I have as well. So that's the only gouache that's actually in the collection. The rest of them are all genuine watercolors. So staying with the yellows and oranges, the other one I have here that I use heaps of, as you can see, this tube is pretty much squished out, and this is I think this is the first tube I've used of this color, but I did have a half pan in this, and next time I buy this color, I'm going to buy the bigger version because I go through it quite a lot. I'm just going to use like a little bit out of the lids of these. I'm not going to bother squirting them out onto a palette or anything. So the nickel azure yellow, as you can see, it's a really, really bright yellow, but you can, again, because it's quite very, very transparent, you know, you can water it down to a really, really light color. But this like really strong, warm yellow is really, really pretty. It's a signal pigment of PY50. This is, again, yet Daniel Smith, and I use this a lot. I mix a lot of greens with this color, so I'll use this with the blues in my collection to make really bright, vibrant greens for landscapes. It mixes really well with pinks and reds to make really bright, vibrant oranges, and it's just a really strongly pigmented, bright, vibrant color that I really, really love. The other orangish sort of color is Quinacridone Deep Gold. This is actually a mixture of nickel azo yellow and quinacridone gold. I do have the quinacridone gold as well, but so I could add, you know, you could swap this one for just the quinacridone gold, not the quinacridone deep gold, and if you had this color and this color, mix them together to make this one. But I find that I like this one a little bit better because to me it reminds me a lot of burnt sienna, and it's a really nice color to mix in to make neutral colors, and it works really well in landscapes. So I'm gonna have to open the lid to get a little bit more out of there. You can see, again, it's another really strongly pigmented color, but it has like that really rich, earthy kind of, what was I saying? God, what's it called? Burnt sienna, that's the color I was thinking of. It's that really strong, earthy burnt sienna color in it, and you can make it like really, really rich. It's a really good mixing color. Mixing this in with like cobalt blues will make it like a really nice sort of neutral green. You can mix in with yellows and oranges. It makes really nice bright colors as well. A lot of the colors that I've chosen for this group I use because I do mix them with each other to create different, you know, values and hues and colors. Another in the orangey yellow department is the Aussie Red Gold, again by Daniel Smith. This one has a few different pigments in it. It has PY83, PR101 and PV19. I don't know what that means, but I feel like that's important information to bestow upon you. Again, I've got a bit of it overlapping the lid here, so I'm going to just take it out of there. So this is a really bright orange. It's a beautiful warm orange. It's very transparent as well. So again, you can add water and blend it down to be quite transparent, or you can have it full punch. Again, I use this Aussie Red Gold as a mixing color a lot with my blues to make different greens. And so that's the main reason I use it. But on its own, it has like this really vibrant orange color, which is really, really fun. The last in my yellows that I use all of the time is lemon yellow. Most of the yellows that I have so far are, I would consider, warm yellows. They do tend more towards the orange spectrum, whereas the lemon yellow is a cool yellow. So it's got more of a greenish tinge to it, and it kind of sits on that cooler side of the spectrum, because I do like to have a palette that has warm and cool colors in it. And so this one is really nice for like just really bright yellow, and also as a mixing color to mix in with greens to make, sorry, to mix in with blues to make really bright greens. But on its own, it's a really nice bright yellow. that packs a lot of punch. So they're all the yellows that I use. Again, most of these I sort of choose them based on their mixing qualities for greens, because I do paint a lot of landscapes and I do a lot of florals. I want to have a really good selection of green mixtures. I've only actually got, I think it's, let me see, I've only got 3 pre-mixed greens in my palette. Everything else I mix based on my yellows and my blues. So that's why I have quite a few yellows in the palette that I use quite often, because I want to get a lot of varieties of green out of those. And I find these sort of sienna-y kind of colours really nice in the Australian sort of landscape that I paint. So now we're going to move into the reds. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Quinacridone Coral by Daniel Smith. So this actually has a very similar, a single pigment colour, so 209. And I do have a colour, let me think, in my acrylic paint that I use quite often, which is called, gosh, I can't think of it now. I'll think of it and put it up on the screen. It's a Matisse colour, and this one reminds me very much of that colour. So I do use it for that reason. It's a very light, almost fluorescent pink. It is very transparent, but it's a beautiful colour for mixing rose sort of colours, like really bright pink, rosy flower colours. You can see it's very, very subtle. It's not a particularly strong colour, but it's a really nice colour. It's a very warm pink as well. It's got a bit of warmth in it, so it sits nicely with like the yellowy colours. The other reds and pinks, the other pink that I have is more of a cool pink. So I have a warm and a cool colour. Again, so it's a very sort of soft pinkish colour, and it's really, really pretty. Let me just move in a little bit closer. I don't think the lighting is really doing it much justice. It looks a lot more fluorescent than what it does in this lighting. But trust me, it is a very fluorescent kind of looking reddish pink. And I really love this colour. I only recently discovered this colour about, probably 5 or 6 months ago. And I've used it so much since then. So the other colour that I have in like the reddish pink spectrum, I actually only have 2 colours that I would consider to be, you know, in the red sort of spectrum. And that is the Quinacridone Coral and the, oops, oh no, ruined my beautiful swatching page. Quinacridone Coral, which I just swatched. I might put that down there because it's leaking. And this one is Quinacridone Lilac. So interestingly, Quinacridone Lilac, the main pigment in this is actually Quinacridone Magenta pigment. But they do already have a Quinacridone Magenta as well. So I'm not quite sure what the difference is there, but I find that the Quinacridone Lilac has a really pretty sort of, it's not quite as purple as the Quinacridone Magenta. It's got a bit more of a pinkish tone to it. And because I really only use it for like flowers or for mixing purples, I think that it works really well, and it's not too overpowering, but it's still really bright. So that's the Quinacridone Lilac, and the pigment for that one is PR122, which again, as I said, is actually Quinacridone Magenta. Okay, so I'm going to come now into some purple colours and the blues. So the first one here is the first Schminke colour that I have. This is Cobalt Violet hue. And this is a really nice soft purple, which I use again for shadows. I use it a lot for sort of mixing darker colours, even though it's not a particularly strong pigment. You can use it to mute down some of the other colours. Get in there to get some of it out, that's a bit better. But it is just a really pretty violet colour. Add a little bit more water. You can see that it's very transparent, but you can also have quite a lot of intensity. But it's a really nice sort of shadow colour, that one. And the other purpley sort of colour that I use a lot of, again, you can see this one's, you know, quite well squished, is Rose of Ultramarine, which is a combination of two pigments. It's PB29 and PV 119. I think it's actually a combination of Quinacridone Rose and Ultramarine, I think. Don't, quote me on that, because like I said, I'm not really an expert on pigments. Again, this one is a bit leaky, but I'll try and get some out of the edge. But you can see it's a very strong pinkish, reddish, bluish purple color. It's the only way to describe it, really. And it's got a really nice granulation in it. So once it dries, it actually has the ultramarine settles down to the bottom first, so you get this bluish tinge underneath that reddish purple. And so that is a really pretty color as well. So now I'm going to talk about a couple of the blues. I actually have quite a lot of blues in my regular rotation of paints. The first one I'm going to talk about is Manganese Blue, which is again a Daniel Smith color. Now this color actually uses the main pigment for Phthalo Blue, and I also have Phthalo Blue, so you can see they're both PB15, but I think they use different binders, which makes them slightly different in color. So I'm just going to show you this one. This is like a really nice warm blue. It's very similar to cerulean. Sorry, it's my dog barking. It's very similar to cerulean blue, but it's really nice for skies and also water. So that's a really pretty blue that I use quite a lot. You can see it's quite an intense blue. And yeah, I use it quite a lot. It is very similar to Phthalo Blue, like I said, but I'll swatch Phthalo Blue up here in a minute, and then you'll be able to see that they are slightly different. The Phthalo Blue is a little bit more of an intense blue. It's a little bit more staining because it has a bit more of that pigment in it than this one. This one isn't as staining, so it has a little bit of a lighter kind of feel to it. The next blue that I use quite a lot of, and that I discovered about 12 months ago, is the Schminke Glacier Blue. This is one of their super granulating colours. It's a really nice cool blue. Get a little bit out of the lid here. And it has a really nice granulation to it. So when I mix it in with the yellows and the oranges to make greens, it adds that granulation to those colours, which means I get a nice granulation in all those colours as well. It mixes really nicely with the lilac as well to make really nice purples. Another colour that I use a lot of is Cobolt Teal Blue. You can see this one's getting a bit empty as well. This is Daniel Smith. This is a really nice turquoise colour. It uses the pigment PG50, which I'm pretty sure is a pretty standard turquoise pigment. A lot of companies use this pigment for their turquoises. So now I'm going to swatch the Phthalo Blue. I don't have a tube of that at the moment. I only have that in a solid. So I'm going to swatch that. This is the Daniel Smith Phthalo Blue. So you can see that it is a really, really strongly pigmented blue. I use this a lot to make darker colours. So I use it as a mixture with the Rose of Ultramarine, or sometimes the Quinacridone Lilac, and sometimes the Quinacridone Deep Gold to make a really, really dark colour. But if I go over here for a second, and I'm sorry, I've made my book really, you can tell I don't do this very often because I'm not very aesthetically pleasing when it comes to swatching colours, because I am too much of a grot to keep anything neat. But I'm going to just swatch these two next to each other, because even though they have the same pigment in them, they're both mainly PB15. You can see that they are actually very different to each other. The Manganese Blue is a lot paler and not as strong as the Phthalo Blue. So this also has a little bit more of a greenish tinge to it, whereas this doesn't. So they're the two differences, and that's why I have both of them in my palette. The Manganese is a really nice sky blue, but the Phthalo Blue makes really nice water. And like I said, I also use it a lot to mix darker colours, so darker greens and darker purple colours. So now I'm going to go into the greens. As I said earlier, I only have 3 actual pre-mixed greens. I usually make my greens by mixing all of these yellows with all of these blues. But the 3 pre-mixed greens that I have is Cascade Green, which is again by Daniel Smith. This is like a really nice granulating green. It's quite a cool green, so it works really nice in sort of shadow areas. Again, if I mix it with the Phthalo Blue, it'll go into quite a nice dark colour, and it has a really nice granulation to it, which again, when I'm mixing up other colours, it then adds the granulation to those colours. Ultramarine Turquoise is another favourite green of mine that I use. Just get a little bit of this out of the lid. Again, it's a very, very, very strong colour. And it is really good for making darks. I don't usually use it just on its own very much. I use it more as a mixing colour. Sometimes I mix it with the Quinacridone Lilac to make a really nice purple. I can mix it in with these, the Nickel Azo Yellow and the Quinacridone Deep Gold to make really deep green colours as well. And the last premixed green that I have is Green Apatite Genuine. And this one is again a really nice sort of granulating colour. It's a very, very warm green. It has that sort of really, I don't know, fresh grass kind of colour to it. Especially when I mix a little bit more yellow into it, I can make a really nice, fresh, bright, yellowish green colour with that one. Last but not least, we have the two neutral colours that I use, which is Moonglow and, now let me find Moonglow, where is it? There it is. Moonglow and Lunar Blue. I don't use black in my palettes very often, if at all. And so these two are probably the closest to like a darker black mixing colour that I have. Moonglow is a really pretty colour that has a couple of different pigments in it, so it does separate and granulate really nicely. And it's nice for shadows. It's like a really, I don't know, I can't really describe this colour. It's like a dark, dirty purple blue. That's probably the best way to kind of describe it. Again, it's a really nice mixing colour. Like if I want to take down some of the saturation of these colours, because a lot of these are very saturated. If you want to take down that saturation and make them a little bit more muted, I can add a bit of this to any of these. And the last one is Lunar Blue, which is basically just, oops, a bit messy there. Lunar Blue is essentially just a black pigment with with Phthalo Blue in it. So it's very similar to Prussian, except it's a little bit less pigmented, so it's not quite as strong as Prussian Blue, but it's still got that Prussian Blue kind of feeling to it. And it can be used really nicely in shadow colours as well. You can see it's quite a blue black, and it's a bit messy, making a mess everywhere. But they're the two neutral colours that I use in my palette. So these are my very messy 2022 favourite watercolours. As I said, I will list all the names of these in the description, so if you haven't already got them yourself, you can have a bit of a look at them. And I hope that you enjoyed that. And I will see you next time.